Education became seen as a freedom right to blacks. As Frederick Douglass once stated, knowledge makes a man unfit to be a slave. Before the Civil War, more than 40 blacks, men and women, graduated from colleges or universities. However, all these institutions were in the North until 1861. In that year, Major General Benjamin Butler wanted to educate the newly escaped slaves in the Grand Contraband Camp, under the great tree known as Emancipation Oak. Hampton University was born. Soon after the Civil War, historic HBCUs, Fisk, Howard, Morehouse, and St. Augustine were founded, and the private Ivy League schools such as Yale and Harvard began admitting blacks. Jim Crow laws ruled the nation and greatly impacted the newly emerging educational system in schools. Still, John Henry Conyers was admitted to the Naval Academy in 1872, and Patrick Francis Healy, who passed for white, became the first president of Georgetown in 1974. By 1880, however, over 45 black colleges and universities were established, and by 1900 there would be 78 HBCUs, and thousands of blacks would earn degrees from white institutions. In the South, as Morehouse and St. Augustine had paved the way, we also saw the establishment of other HBCUs. In Virginia, Virginia Union University, which was established on land deeded by Lumpkin's widow in 1865. Virginia Normal and Industrial Institute, known as Virginia State University, the nation's first publicly funded land-grant institution, was established in 1882. St. Paul's College came soon thereafter in 1888, and Norfolk State University rose along tidewater ways by 1935. Public schools in Virginia were segregated from the outset. A United States Supreme Court decision known as Plessy versus Ferguson established the idea of separate but equal, and this doctrine led to the justified legal segregation of schools in the North and the South. However, this was as much of a relief for black parents as it was for whites, as blacks felt that their children could be educated or should be educated without fear of harassment and discrimination. And many of the Commonwealth's first schools were founded by churches and supported by black businessmen and women. And those public schools for blacks were left at the mercy of white-controlled state government for funding. As a result, many black schools received far less financial support, fewer books, inferior buildings, and fewer well-paid teachers. One of the pioneering forces in education in Richmond was Virginia Randolph, a cousin to our very own Deaconess Gladys Williams. The daughter of emancipated slaves, Randolph began teaching in 1892 and rose to the prominence when she was named the United States' first Jeans supervising industrial teacher. Her 57-year career as an educator saw the birth of vocational education for blacks. Still, black Virginians were able to accomplish great things and became some of the leading educators in America. Just as Virginia Union became the center for creating the nation's Southern black preachers, Virginia State University and St. Paul's became known for creating the nation's Southern black teachers. Freedmen's Bureau, missionary societies, and billionaire Julius Rosenwald helped to fund construction and provide supplies, with Rosenwald being responsible for more than a third of the South's black public schools. The colored normal school, now known as Armstrong High School, was opened in the 1870s and was originally financed by the Freedmen's Federal Bureau. It was the first public school for blacks in Richmond. Soon thereafter, Maggie Walker High School was founded. George Washington Carver High School was the first black public high school for blacks in Chesterfield County, with roots dating back to 1915. Eventually, the call for fairness and equal education would not be ignored. Across the South, the NAACP and its legal defense teams, which included the likes of Oliver Hill, Spotswood Robinson, and Thurgood Marshall, challenged public schools, colleges, and universities, as well as localities. They won equal pay for teachers and eventually dismantled the separate but equal doctrine by winning the landmark United States Supreme Court case of Brown versus the Board of Education, which concluded that segregation without equal and fair accommodations for black students was unconstitutional. In time, localities would close schools, be forced to reopen schools, and ultimately fully integrate their classrooms. Chandler Junior High School became the first sign of that change when on September 6, 1960, Gloria Jean Meade then 13, and Carol Irene Swan, then 12, became the first black students to enroll in the formerly all-white Richmond Public Schools. Today, the Richmond School District is 90% minority, and the Chandler Building on East Brooklyn Park Boulevard houses Richmond Community High School. The educators, like the clergy, worked hard to establish strong communities. The Mount Carmel Baptist Church had a connection to many of these great innovators and educators. They established businesses like the Richmond Teachers Federal Credit Union, now known as Richmond Heritage Federal Credit Union, one of the country's only remaining black-run banking institutions, advocated for educational equity and stood as some of the first plaintiffs in the equal pay cases across the state. Several of the Mount Carmel Baptist Church pastors and disciples were a part of the area's schools and colleges. While many of our black schools still face issues of sufficient funding and the availability of resources, they are a far cry from the buildings and resources of the 1880s. And African American children around the area and in this church are recognized as top scholars as well as athletes in their schools. The Mount Carmel Baptist Church and its family of churches stand tall and remain reminders of more than 2 centuries of the resolve and scholarship of black people.